Welcome to Business for Review and the Women Running Businesses podcast. My name is Francisca Lee, and I'll be your host. If this is your first time listening to Women Running Businesses, we are a weekly podcast that brings successful female entrepreneurs in every week to dive deeper into their minds. So stick around to hear authentic and honest conversations surrounding entrepreneurship, and make sure to subscribe to stay in the loop. Today, we have a very special guest, Shayna Zafar. Shayna is the Chief Marketing Officer at Juve Consulting, a student at the University of Pennsylvania, an ambassador at the United States of Women, and lots more. But who wants to hear me list out all of her accomplishments when we could talk about them with her? Shayna, we're so glad to have you on today's episode.
Thank you so much for having me, Francesca. I'm really excited to dive into conversation with you.
Of course. So let's start off with talking about Juve. Can you tell me a little bit about what Juve is and what you do there?
Yeah, so Juve is a Gen Z marketing company where we get to engage with Fortune 500 companies, nonprofits, brands, and startups to authentically reach Gen Z. And what that means is that our entire team is led by Gen Zers, and we have a few non-Gen Zers on our team, but we basically get to allow brands and different entities understand our generation straight from the primary source of young people. And it's really exciting work where I get to be really creative and we get to do purpose-driven work and all of the campaigns and activations that we do as well.
That's awesome. How did you get started working with Juve? And did you know the founder before?
It's such a wild story. So I met my co-founder and best friend at a Model UN conference my freshman year of college at Harvard, and I knew of Ziad. He is quite the enigma and personality and character. So he was like Muslim, was in advocacy spaces, so I knew him tangentially through that. And I remember walking into my committee room, seeing this short brown man, and I said, wait, I know who that is. And introduced myself, we chatted, we talked a little bit, and then at the end of the conference, I got first place, he got second place. And he said, come and work for Juve. And I thought, who is this crazy college freshman thinking that I'm going to come work for him? Absolutely not. But I ended up joining my summer. We reincorporated the company. We started from the ground up, and I've basically been hooked ever since and been going to school full time and working full time since my freshman summer, and I wouldn't trade it for the world.
That's awesome. And during your time with Juve so far, you've had a lot of different roles, from chief of product to chief of staff and now chief of marketing. What has prompted this shift in roles each time?
That is a great question. You've really done your homework. I've had more title changes than even that. So
Oh my God.
it's crazy because I think when you're at a startup, a lot of those core people that first start the business wear a lot of different hats. And my role became like this catch-all at Juve, where Ziad could tell me to do anything from a client call to making a deck to presenting and pitching, and I could do any of it. And being a jack of all trades is really exciting and good in some ways, but at the same time, specialization and being able to build up my own vertical or my own segment within Juve wasn't something I really got to do because I was so busy just supporting Ziad and my team with whatever they might have needed. So in my role as chief marketing officer, we never really had a marketing department until a few months ago, really. And it came out of this need for understanding how everything from sales to impact to all the verticals that we see in thought leadership and different areas of interest within Juve dependent on a marketing department. So I have been able to navigate a lot of different things, and even within the marketing role or the work that I do, I oversee our verticals in terms of marketing practices internally and externally, oversee brand with my wonderful senior director of brand, Sandra, and then partnerships, impact, and research are all still under my purview. So there's a lot happening, and we're learning to delegate and build out new roles at the company, but again, the startup hustle is really real. So I've had a lot of different hats and a lot of different titles. But at the end of the day, whatever the company's needs have been, I've tried to realign myself and be malleable to them. But it's been really interesting to be able to be tapped into all the different parts of the company and grow as an individual as the company grows itself too.
For sure. Yeah, I think one of the most crucial parts of working at a startup is just how much that really falls onto your plate, that you have to kind of figure out how to how to do marketing or how to oversee a team of people. So that's so cool that you've been able to do all of that so far. And I know Juve works on some influencer marketing campaigns. How does your role as CMO play into those types of projects?
Yeah, so I do a lot of our work internally. So when it comes to the Juve brand or thought leadership work and the Gen Z space, that's my main focus. And then when it comes to influencer work, we have a network called the Shoutout that is led by Nate Jones, who's our head of influencer marketing. And he's able to basically oversee and manage different relationships with influencers. We're going to be in LA for a month in June. So I'll be on that team as well, coordinating and basically getting to oversee some parts of the influencer space in that way. But it's great that a lot of the influencers just end up becoming like our friends, and we're able to get lunch with them or get froyo with them and just hang out with them, but at the same time say, hey, there's a project or something that you'd be a really great fit for. So those relationships aren't just limited to a business capacity. And my role with the influencer network is very much so more in the support from thinking about client projects or just being mindful of how that influencer network exists on its own. But there's a whole separate team that's leading that vertical. And I basically only think about it more from like the marketing perspective of like, okay, well, who exists in our network? Are there any gaps? And then how does that fit into our client repertoire as well?
Yeah, that's awesome. So, of course, the pandemic, drastically changed things for everything. How has Juve as an organization changed or adapted since the pandemic started?
For us, COVID-19 was definitely a moment of growth. And I think in a lot of ways, though, it was this wake up call that was jarring for the business world. At the same time that we were facing this health pandemic, we were facing a social justice pandemic with the resurgence of Black Lives Matter. I think it was a reminder that a lot of people have been, and a lot of Black folks have been doing the work and committing themselves to social equity and social justice for years, for decades, for centuries since the inception of this country. But in order for us to really galvanize in a dramatic way, you need white allyship and you need non-POC allies as well as those that are within and outside of that community to care about those issues as well. So for our clients, I think that was also a wake-up call. You couldn't just post a black square or an empty statement and expect to show up for the causes and issues you cared about. And when COVID first hit and college campuses were going virtual, high schools were going virtual, students were also being dramatically impacted. Your lives are being shifted in your everyday norms. So we gave away 26,000 in micro grants to young students and young people in need. That was like for school purposes, that was for Wi-Fi, that could have been due to housing insecurity. And we went through a robust application process that was like a blind reading of all the applications. And we donated money to Black Lives Matter groups for COVID-19. And in general, it was for us a reminder of how important purpose is to us constantly. And I think for our clients, they finally understood some of the things that we were always preaching to them in terms of social impact, in terms of social justice and advocacy, and how not all of these spheres of influence exist separately, but exist within one another and are interconnected. So COVID for us was a moment of growth, and now our team has like 15 full-time employees. We're hiring people in full-time roles right now. So if you're looking to get a job or have a side hustle, like feel free to check out our website. But it's crazy to think that we're now hiring people in the company that I didn't even know were being a part of the team. So we've scaled a lot during COVID, but it's also been a reminder of staying grounded and remembering the things that have been crucial to the work that we do.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you're a huge advocate for social impact and, social justice. And you're currently an ambassador at the United States of Women. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that organization is and what you do as an ambassador?
Yeah, so the United States of Women is an organization that came out of the Obama administration and the White House, and basically came from this conference where it was all about getting young women to run for office. And after the conference happened, they realized that they wanted to keep the momentum going. So the ambassadorship program basically allocates 1 to 2 individuals per state, where you work on advocacy work or you create your own project of sorts to highlight an issue within your community or something that you want to do in terms of advocacy. So my work is tied a lot more to international group advocacy. So in terms of what we're seeing, for example, in Xinjiang, China, with the forced labor usage of Uyghur Muslims, I'm basically working on a project that's understanding what are the dynamics of corporations and corporate advocacy in that space, and how can we basically be mindful of international like geopolitical activism, and what is the role of an entity like the United States in international discourse, right? And when companies and multinational corporations are being held accountable for, or are they being held accountable for the work that they're doing abroad? So that's some of the advocacy work that I'm doing. And across my campus and my undergraduate career, I was focused on Muslim and Asian American advocacy in general. So whether that was, serving for local student groups, for fundraising purposes, everything that we're seeing with hashtag Stop Asian Hate as well, have all been things that have been quite close to within my community. But I think have also brought up questions of identity and what does it mean to be a South Asian when the word Asian is such an umbrella term in the United States, and reconciling some of those parts with the advocacy work that I do, and like being mindful of the fact that even when we're seeing other social justice movements like Black Lives Matter emerge, there's a lot of anti-Blackness within the Asian community. So how are we being mindful of and being cognizant of the fact that there are these contradictions and these inconsistencies that exist, and how can I, at the same time educate myself about those as well?
Yeah, and that's so important, especially as we're seeing like that rise of the social justice movements in, the past couple of months, this last year. So you're a huge advocate for women, and in particular also AAPI and Muslim issues. Do you ever feel the emotional burden of, the continuous advocation?
I think advocacy manifests for everyone differently, and sometimes your mere existence as someone who is Asian, Muslim, and cognizant of all your other identities, your mere the fact that you are existing in spaces that aren't really meant for you is in some ways a form of advocacy, right? When I walk into boardrooms, I don't see people that look like me, or I've even noticed in my own behaviors or the own ways that I'm policing myself often within the workplace or within school is indicative of some of those implicit patriarchal systems that are in place. So I think it's less about the exhaustion that you feel at a high level, but more so about those everyday microaggressions and your everyday activities that make you attuned to your mere existence in some ways, right? Like I can't separate or divorce myself of the fact that I am Muslim or I am South Asian, or I correct people every time they try to say my name incorrectly. Like these are all implicit things that mean so much to me, and so many markers of my identity I try to present out externally because they are important to me. So it's less about the exhaustion that you feel at that high level. And I think for me, it's much more so about the everyday, maybe sometimes even mundane acknowledgement of the fact that there are greater systemic issues that exist, and what can I do in my everyday life to overcome those microaggressions, or to be an effective ally or even an effective advocate. There's a difference between those two principles as well, and something that I'm constantly reevaluating and reconciling with.
Right, that's so important. How have you faced imposter syndrome, especially, being so young and working in these higher level, boardrooms and stuff like that? How do you deal with imposter
How
syndrome?
much time do we have? Have I faced imposter syndrome? I could talk about that for ages. So I'm a first-gen low-income college student. When I came to Penn, I didn't even know what the Ivy League really was. I knew what Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford were, and I was like, oh, there's like the only quote-unquote good schools. I had no real depth of understanding of how complicated college admissions was, or any real understanding of even that. So when I came to Penn, I 100% felt like I was an outsider. And I don't think that's really gone away in a lot of ways, but I think what I have realized is that everyone is kind of lost, and we're all in different times and spaces feeling like imposters, and the spotlight effect is real. If there's anything I've learned from my psychology classes, it's that we tend to over exaggerate our own personal behaviors or mannerisms as if everyone else is noticing them, when in reality literally no one cares. So navigating that even within college and then coming into the workplace, I found myself oftentimes being really hyper mindful of what I was saying, what I was doing, and very much so in some ways being quiet, which is really surprising because I talk a lot and I talk really fast with my friends, but I only talk in calls if I was being spoken to, right? Even if I had an idea, I was like, oh, there's no relevance, like I'm not going to bring it up right now. But in so many ways, the things that I was keeping to myself, someone else would bring up a few days later, a few weeks later, or a year later, and I thought to myself, wait, I literally had said this, or I had this thought earlier, why didn't that manifest, or why didn't that come about? So I think learning to become someone who can speak on your behalf and believe in the work or in your abilities is powerful. Like, theoretically, there's nothing stopping you from believing that you're the smartest person in the room. And even if you're not, that's okay. But having that type of confidence and energy really does elevate what you're saying and what you believe. And I've had a lot of people tell me that they think I'm quite confident, but I sometimes don't even feel that way often. So it's really interesting to see how you project out versus how you project in, and how you feel about your own self. And imposter syndrome is definitely something that I think has been prevalent in business and corporate spaces, as well as my own day-to-day occurrences within college too.
For sure. And speaking of college, you're currently a student at UPenn. What are you studying
So
there?
I'm an international relations major with a minor in consumer psychology and South Asian studies, and I have 31 days until graduation.
Oh my God, that's exciting.
Thank you.
Congrats.
Thank
What are
you.
your plans for after
I will be
college?
working full time at Juve, so I'm super, super excited to be at my startup, to have autonomy in my role, and be into the real world, as they say.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, 31 more days and then you're a real adult.
Apparently, I'm not convinced. That when I just turned 21 last December, and I felt so gross. I was like, nope, this is what it feels like to be an adult. I'm no longer in my 20s, as in 20, but it was definitely daunting.
Yeah, that's crazy. So, why did you choose UPenn for college?
So I chose Penn. Honestly, it's a crazy way to think about college admissions, and as Ivy Day and all these college admissions for other folks are coming out now, I definitely felt like I had to prove myself in high school. And I was that type A kid that was president of all the clubs and going to the conferences and going to competitions. And I really felt like college was everything, and I needed to get into good school. And it's true for me, at least. I was very close minded, and I thought that those schools that you see as number one, two, three, and four on US World News rankings were the only schools that mattered. So my dream actually was to like be on the West Coast. So like I remember getting into Berkeley and being so much more excited than I was about Penn, because I really wanted to be on the West Coast. And I thought it would really like mellow me out, because I'm so hyperactive and excitable, that it would be a good energy for me. But I'm someone who really believes that you end up where you belong. And my process to Penn was that I was a Questbridge finalist. I applied to a lot of different schools within the Questbridge consortium, as well as safeties and some schools on the Common App. And I ended up applying to way too many schools, but I got a likely letter from Penn. I ended up EDing, revoked my ED to RD, and all of this to say that I still ended up at Penn, when it all netted out, in terms of everything from like the financial aid to like I spoke to people who were from my school district who went to Penn. There were very few people that ended up going into the Ivy League from my school district. And when I talked to Jay Shaw, he's now at Stanford Medical School. So it's crazy to think that he's on the West Coast, but he became someone that was such a massive mentor for me and really guided me through the entire process, considering we both came from similar backgrounds, and said that, Penn is one of the, if you feel like you could see yourself belonging at Penn. And I came for like a fly-in program my senior year of high school for multicultural students. And he was like, you've been to the campus, you've seen it before. And if you can imagine yourself being there in terms of the culture, and he was very honest and transparent with all his experience, he's like, you should, consider it. And I can't imagine myself being anywhere else after the mess of applying to like 30 plus schools, after revoking my ED to RD and being stressed and being worried I wasn't going to get in anywhere. The decision was so clear. And I just thought back to, what he said to me, and he was like, do you think you can picture yourself there? And I thought, yeah, and that's that. And I have a lot of Penn pride now, which I didn't think I would. So that's crazy to think about too.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know a few people, like my friends at Penn, and it always comes down, like for them, college applications was crazy. It all came down to, can I see myself on campus? Like in 4 years, will I be happy there? And that's what made their decision too. So that's
Yeah,
awesome.
so true.
And you mentioned Questbridge. Can you talk a little bit about like that
Mm.
process, how that kind of impacted your
Yeah.
decision?
So Questbridge is basically a program where if you get the scholarship match, you basically get a full ride to any of the schools that you're matched to, and they have a specific subsect of colleges in their consortium. A lot of the Ivy League schools, liberal arts schools, privately institutions are part of it. And I decided to do Questbridge because, again, I was the first in my family to go to college. I didn't really know much about the college admissions process, and I had a few other friends that were applying. And I think what was really nice about Questbridge has like a program for juniors that's the college prep scholars. I did that, then I did the Questbridge process, and being a finalist was like really exciting and just interesting because like you had your own pipeline and portal to come up with questions and submit your application. I think I was just really bad at time management, I'm not gonna lie. And I had all these essays to do all at once. And I think looking back, even in retrospect, like I just wish I had more fun with my essays. Like that's the one part of your application where you can say your truth and no one can deny you it. It's your story to tell, and no one else will have the same essay as you, which is so powerful in so many ways. So I remember being really, really stressed with time management. So I definitely could have been better at that. But Questbridge was a great way to find other communities, to like, even when I came to Penn, like finding other Questbridge scholars or Figley students was really nice. And it's like a immediate bond that you have with someone if you both did Questbridge. So definitely something that I learned a lot from. I wish I just like been a little bit more mindful of the timeline. And whenever students come to me and they're like, oh, should I do it or should I not? I'm like, there's no harm. Like you should definitely think about it. And if you're someone like me who didn't necessarily know exactly where they wanted to go, and you don't have an ED place in mind or an EA decision in mind, then definitely go for Questbridge because you get to apply quote unquote early to a bunch of different schools through the match process. And without Questbridge, I wouldn't have gotten a likely letter from Penn either. So I owe a lot to Questbridge and finding that community of first and low income college students as well.
That's awesome. And of course, college was kind of always in your plans, correct?
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason I'm working full time and going to school full time. I am here to get my degree, irrespective of how many C's, B's, A's I get on my transcript. I am 100% someone who believes in the power of college, and even less so for your education and more so for the experience and the people. Like I love Penn for the people, whether that's my peers, my colleagues, my friends, or my professors. I've definitely found that college is something that's irreplaceable. And I'm reflecting a lot on that because I've about a month until I graduate. So college was always in my books and something that I would not have traded for anything.
Now I'm curious because I'm currently a sophomore, right? So we kind of hit that like sophomore slump. Was there ever a time like in your college career that you were kind of like, I could just drop out now and focus on, X, Y, Z. There's a list of other things I could do. Was there ever a time that you kind of thought that?
For me, sophomore slump was real, but I was definitely having this reckoning with my college culture, my college campus culture. So I realized that a lot of people my at my school were basically only trying to have a good GPA to get a good job, and everyone was going into the same three fields. And it just felt like no one actually cared about the issues. Like I came into college thinking I was going to have 3 a.m. intellectual conversations with my friends for everything from like your job and your career and the things that you want to do in life to boys and existential questions of what's the meaning of life and the world. So I thought that's what college was going to be like. And I became really apathetic with Penn culture. And I was like getting really bad grades in my accounting classes and getting like 30s and 40s. And normally I would be the type of kid that was like, wait, I need to sit down and study and like figure out what's going on. And I was like, who cares? I don't like accounting. And I'm not going to do this in my career long term. Why am I even taking these classes? And it's a good GPA for a job. No one's here to learn. And it was when I talked to I literally had like Jay Shaw, the person that I mentioned before, Zuhaib, Nayab, like these are all people who were upperclassmen when I was at Penn. They came into my room, stormed in, brought me ice cream, and had these signs that said official intervention. And we're like, we're going to sit you down and we're going to tell you about all the struggles that we've had at Penn. And we don't want you to make the same mistakes that we did, but we care so much about you. And this was literally during final season. Like if there's one way to motivate me, it's by making me feel bad that I'm taking away time from other people. So I was like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I can't be in my slum, and my slump. And literally they said like, this is how our experience was like. You have so much time to like boost up your grades. You'll be okay. Like, let's make a study schedule and a study plan for you. I still have that official intervention sign up in my room. I made all of them sign it. I still have my study plan template that my friend Nayab made. Like, was crazy. And the fact that 3 people would come during final season when they're all stressed or in more difficult classes than I am, and say to me that you'll be okay and you'll be fine, we believe in you, was so powerful. And it would be disrespectful for me not to care when people that I care about took out the time to do that for me. So I've definitely never had a thought that I would leave or drop out of Penn or leave college, but I've definitely thought about how it's made me feel, how the campus culture is so persuasive and pervasive in terms of this quote unquote Penn face that we experience at Penn, and that I think is true at a lot of schools, of pretending that your social life, your academic life, your intellectual capacity, everything is all set and you're doing fine and you're thriving, when in reality there's a lot of things that are happening and bubbling beneath the surface, but we just don't acknowledge it.
For sure. And that's so awesome that your friends took that time out of their, studying to kind of make sure that you were okay.
Literally, they're the real ones. You said it.
Now, walk me through what a typical day in the life of Shayna looks like. Like, what do you eat for breakfast? What do you do in your, I'm guessing, very limited free time? All that.
Oh gosh. What is a typical day in the life of Shina? Well, you kind of said it. I really do be addicted to my Google Calendar. So if it's on my calendar, it's not happening. I am one of those people. It's all color coordinated, and I'm very, very mindful of, I put everything on there. So a typical day for me looks like, on a good day, I'm waking up at a 9, but I'm probably not waking up at 9, and I'm probably going to wake up before my first call, which is usually at 10 a.m. or 10:30 if it's class, and I'll start my day off, go to class, wait in my bed because I don't have a desk in my room, but I'll go to class, I'll go to my calls, I'll brush my teeth, probably because I woke up so late that I didn't even have time to do that. Brush my teeth, try to make a smoothie if I can, trying to be a healthy queen at the moment. It's not really working out, but I'm doing my best, and that's okay. I try to go on walks throughout the day as much as I can, so I'll probably squeeze in 1 or 2 walks, and hit my step count. If I can hit more than 10K steps in a day, that is a huge win for me. I actually have a car on my campus, so I tend to have dinner plans with friends always. Given COVID, that's obviously in limitation, but we'll do outdoor dining, and I'm a massive foodie, so I'm always updating my spreadsheet and looking at new places to go to and planning out dinner plans after all my calls and classes for the day. And then since I have a car on campus, I tend to do a lot of late night drives. I'll blast some music. I have a playlist for every single mood. So you name the mood, I have a playlist for it. And I go on a drive with some of my friends sometimes, and that makes me really, really happy and free at times, especially when my day is back to back, sometimes from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. It's really important for me to schedule time where I do self-care. And for me, self-care looks like getting dinner with my friends, or spending time with them, or just getting froyo or journaling for an hour or so, because those are the things that just make me pause for a minute and not be tied to my calendar as much as I love it. So that's a typical day in my life. A lot of calls, a lot of virtual meetings, but always finding some time for myself as well.
Yeah, that's so important to, find time for yourself, especially when you spend so much of your day on the phone, on the computer, talking with other people. Just finding that time is so important. And with that, I think this is a great place to end the episode. Shina, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your experiences. It's honestly so cool to hear how much that you've accomplished. And for our listeners, make sure to tune back in next week for a new episode of Women Running Businesses.
Thank you so much.